Oh, well, very warm welcome to you and welcome back to another week on the allotment. Beautiful sunrise, as you can see, lovely day ahead. But it is that time of year when you've still got warm temperatures in the daytime. It's still shorts and t-shirt weather at midday, but in the mornings it really is quite chilly. So first thing I did when I got up here this morning was put the fire on. I had a couple of hours sitting in the shed. Absolutely love it. I know it's crazy, but I just love being up here. So it's really a transitional period now on the allotment. All the summer crops are over. We've stopped harvesting any salads. I've got some spring onions left, but we probably won't eat those. We've now moved to the warmer dishes. So that you saw the tomatoes have gone. And I'll show you in a minute, but all the squashes now, the leaves are dying back, they're mildewed, they're rotten, which is allowing the plants or the fruits themselves to be exposed to the sunlight and ripen, which is lovely. So yeah, the summer is behind us now, and it was quite a memorable one. And now we're looking forward to the autumn and to cropping those autumn crops, the cabbages, the leeks, the squashes, the parsnips. I haven't had any parsnips yet. And looking forward to sowing broad beans, garlic, onions, with a view to next year. And I remember Monty Don saying last year that he considers October the 1st to be the beginning of the gardening year. And I completely understand that. I would agree with it, that you really do start to look forward to the growing season when you start to sow things for next year. So not a great deal to do on the plot, and there's no doubt that overwhelming feeling to keep on top of things has died back for me, and it's really a case of just pottering along gently, starting the tidying up of the plot where all the grass and the nasturtiums are growing in paths, continuing to water. Still no rain really. We had a deluge a couple of weeks back which greened up all the grass beautifully and got me back to working again, but really hasn't made a great deal of difference on the plot. So yeah, welcome along. I do have one job to do that involves a fig, and something slightly different for me, but other than that it really is ticking along very well on the plot. But anyway, you're very welcome. Well, I know I've pointed them out before. I mean, let's face it, what haven't you seen before? But these cosmos have been stunning. But again, as with everything on the allotment, as in life, you look at it and you think that's good, but it could be better. It does actually hinder me walking along past this very well trafficked path. So next year I'm going to grow exactly the same. Believe it or not, they're a dwarf cosmos. You wouldn't believe it to look at, but I'm going to put some canes and some string in that bed before they grow and just try and keep them back. But they've been absolutely stunning, as have the zinnias over on the rest area. So these are winter squash, mashed potato and butternut squashes, and the fruit are maturing and ripening, and you can see that the leaves are just starting, the mildew, which is perfectly normal, and they're going to start dropping and drooping and dying back. And I think, now or certainly in the next week I shall be able to cut off the mashed potato squash and start to harden them off. These two courgette plants have been absolute beasts. They've completely left their original bed. Obviously I don't give them enough room there, and they're now forcing their way between these gooseberries that I put here some time ago when I moved them to build the pond. They've got new growth on them. I mean, with these colder nights I don't think they've got much longer left, and the fruit have certainly slowed right up. But yeah, they've been absolutely fantastic this year. Still no sign of the asparagus dying back. And the sunflowers here, I was talking to Les the other day down the other end of the plot, and when we finished chatting and I walked back up the plot, there were 4 rats at the top of those sunflowers eating the seeds. About a month ago, Monty Don on Gardener's World sowed some dwarf French beans and said now is a good time, they'll crop very quickly and you'll get a crop in the autumn. So I thought, right, I went straight out after watching the programme and sowed some myself. If Monty Don says it, it must be true, and I'm not convinced. I mean, there's flowers on them now. We'll see. But it'd be nice to get a fresh new crop. And if I do, I shall do it again next year. The runner beans were really poor this year. The heat did for them. They hardened very quick and became inedible. But I've left them up, and as you can see they're drying out, and I shall save my seeds. And as with all the squashes, the gourd birdhouse are dying back. Look quite forlorn, really. I suppose that's a cue that I could start to cut off the fruit. I haven't actually counted them, but I've got quite a few. I'm very, very pleased. It's the highlight of my year, I've got to be honest. And I'm not going to eat a single one. Talking of highlights of the year, the carrots have been fantastic. Now they do have carrot fly. So one of the packets of seeds I got at the show yesterday was a carrot fly resistant packet of carrots. We'll see. But I've learnt, one of the things I've learnt on my 6 years at the plot is that with today's environment you have to grow the resistant varieties of everything. So I have to grow clubroot resistant brassicas. I have to grow leek resistant, rust resistant leeks, blight resistant tomatoes and potatoes, and that's the same with the carrots. If you go for the old heritage varieties, they get decimated by pests. Everything has to be resistant. No additions yet to my tub area because they're still full of carrots and parsnips, but I did want to say how pleased I am with the 2 apple trees I bought. Bridget and her husband John recommended it to me that B&M was selling off young apple trees for $5 each. So I dashed straight down there and I got 2. One is a Granny Smith, that one there, and the one up the other end of the plot is called Jonah Gold. Jonah Gold are the sweetest, juiciest apple I have ever tasted. Without a shadow of a doubt, head and shoulders above any other apple. I mean, these Granny Smiths are nice, but that Jonah Gold, they are out of this world. Stunning. I finished off that fence this week that just runs along the side of the plot where I took those blackberries out. So that fence is done, and this is another wigwam of gourd birdhouse. I've shown you it before, and I just love the way it cascades down. It's throttling the poor old purple kale, but I think they're going to survive. And there's also some leeks in there. Not sure if they're still there or whether they've died off, but I've just let this thing do its thing, and it looks fantastic. And again, that's more gourds to harvest. I've never been able to successfully grow autumn raspberries. Up behind the sheds I've got a plant of summer raspberries, and they are stunning, beautiful, really good raspberries. And there were some runners coming off them So I've dug them up and I've moved them, and I'm watering them fastidiously. And although they don't look particularly well sat there in the corner, I think they're going to survive. So really pleased with that, and I shall be able to train those up against the trellis. There's no sign of any life in that blackberry that I've obviously chopped off when I was taking out the josterberry. Very silly of me. But I'm very pleased with this blackberry that has now picked up because it's been cleared of all the competition that the josterberry bullied it. So that looks good, and it will crop nicely next year, hopefully. So I'm very pleased with the way this area has developed, and those raspberries are a great addition. The more raspberries we can have on the plot, the better. Oh, it's getting hot out there now. Just something of mild interest regarding health. A friend of mine, that's all I'll say, spoke to me about 8 or 9 months ago and said, we often have a chat about health. And he said that he'd been told by his doctor, he started by saying he'd been put on a couple of medications. And he said he'd been told that he had high blood pressure and that they'd given him a blood thinner and something else. I didn't inquire, but he did say warfarin. And I asked him, just out of interest, because it fascinates me, but I don't go to doctors. I said, did they tell you or speak to you about why your body had decided to raise your blood pressure? He said, no, they never mentioned that. They just said that high blood pressure is dangerous and we need to lower it. And I said, and I'm no expert, not at all. I'm not qualified. I'm just interested, and I read a lot of scientific literature. And of course the book, How Not to Die, which goes into great detail about heart disease. And I said, from what I understand, the body is a highly complex, intelligent system. And it doesn't raise your blood pressure for no good reason. There's a reason for it. And I said, well, from what I've read, it means all your arteries and your veins and your capillaries are slowly filling up with saturated fat and clogging up the arteries. And as the pipes get thinner, so the body has to raise the blood pressure to force it through these ever narrowing blood vessels. So, unless, I said to him, you really must look into doing something about clearing out the saturated fat. And of course, as soon as I said whole food plant-based diet has been scientifically proven, the only diet to reverse heart disease, that wasn't that well received. Anyway, fast forward 8 or 9 months, and he's had a heart attack. Now, all I've done is wish him well, and that's the end of it. But it fascinates me that, and he's had a stent fitted, and he's now on 5 medications a day. And I genuinely don't understand. This thing about reversing heart disease has been known since the 60s and 70s, when people like Nathan Pritikin, and then later on Dean Ornish and Michael Greger, and all these people, and Caldwell Esselstyn, they've all taken people who are at the very last stages of heart disease and have been told to go home and put their affairs in order, put them onto a strict whole food plant-based diet, and they've reversed their heart disease. No more cardiac events. Now, either the doctors aren't reading the scientific literature and keeping up to date, or they're ignoring it. Anyway, I found it mildly interesting. And of course, now he's on the conventional treatment, he will have a conventional outcome. And of course, you don't need me to tell you, as the #1 killer in the UK, what that is. But it's all very sad and frustrating. But anyway, mildly interesting. Another job that I did this week, and it's the 3rd time I've done it, is weed the strawberries and cut off all the runners. I did grow some new plants from runners a month or so ago, and they're planted. In fact, there's one there. You can see they're noticeably smaller. So I've grown all the runners I wanted. But you look in the magazines or the books, it says this time of year, cut off all the runners, cut off all the excess green leaves and they're ready for the winter. It doesn't tell you that you have to do it 3, 4, maybe more times. Again, there's another new plant. Yeah, I've done it 3 times and I will expect to have to do it again continually. Anyway, no complaints. The strawberries are worth it. But yeah, they're all looking a lot neater. But I have noticed, I did this 3 days ago and already there are the signs of new runners coming off the plants. They just will not give up. It's a war of attrition. Just something to lighten the mood. Some trivia. I'm not sure if I've done this one before. I knew, without reading the book, I already knew this one. The rule of thumb is a rough estimate based on experience rather than a formal calculation. This dates back to the Middle Ages when it was legal for a man to beat his wife with a cane no thicker than his thumb. Evidence of this comes to light in the Biographical Dictionary of the Judges of England, written by Edward Foss in 1864. In the text, Foss suggests that a husband may beat his wife so that the stick with which he administers the castigation is not thicker than his thumb. Oh, how I long for the old days. Isn't it amazing how society changes? Yeah, unbelievable. I mean, that's quite thick. Right, I'll move on quickly. I'm joking, by the way, obviously. You know, I am acutely aware that we live in a world now where senses of humour are scorned and frowned upon. But anyway, I find that funny. Not that they did that. I'll stop. If a person is not worth his salt, they are regarded as not very good at their job and not worth the wages. During the days of the Roman Empire, salt was an expensive commodity, and soldiers were actually partly paid in salt, which they carried in leather pouches. This payment was known as salarium, from the Latin word sal, meaning salt. The modern word for wages, salary, also originates from this source. I didn't know that. Salary from salt. And here's another interesting fact, one that I don't need the book for. The difference between to be sacked and fired. Back again in the Middle Ages, when tradesmen would wander the country looking for work, they would carry their tools in an old Hessian sack. And if they were hired and the job that they were doing was finished and it came to the natural order that they had to move on, they were given their sack back to put their tools in and move on. So in other words, there was nothing, they hadn't done anything wrong. They had just finished their work and they were given the sack. If they were fired, it meant they were no good at their job, or they were dangerous, or there was some problem. The employer would take their tools, give them to the blacksmith to fire in the forge so that they couldn't work again. So their tools were fired, and that was the difference between giving the sack and being fired. Those two have sort of blurred nowadays, haven't they? But there is a distinct difference. Interesting. Well, I have one very specific job today on the plot, and I've shown you it before. This is my fig. Melvin very kindly gave me one of his cuttings that he took last year. I've potted it on into a larger pot, and it's thrived. It was only that big when I got it, and I only got it earlier in the summer. And it really has romped on, and I've got tiny little figs, and I think the perceived wisdom is if they're bigger than a pea, I should take them off. So I think I will be taking those off. It's slightly bigger than a pea, although there are new fruit setting there, and I shall see. Something else I read in a magazine is that, and you shouldn't believe everything you hear or read, if you want to crop a fig, to prevent it just putting on lots of green, lush, leafy growth, and to make it concentrate on producing fruit, you should restrict its roots. So it explained in the magazine article how to do that, and I've done that, and I'll show you now. So the article said get some slabs, and I've taken these from my paths, so I've had to sacrifice a certain stability on my paths for this. But it's, as you can see, basically it's a slab box with a slab in the bottom, and I suppose the theory is that constrains and restricts the roots, which puts the plant under a certain amount of stress and forces it to produce fruit to reproduce. So I've got some allotment compost there, which I'm going to put in the bottom of that bed, and then I'm going to backfill with the soil I took out, and we'll see how it goes. That's fantastic. I only potted this on a couple of months ago, and look at the root system on it. That's fantastic. I'm thrilled with that. I thought it might not have that, and it would all the soil would fall off the roots, but that's wonderful. Right, well that's the fig planted in its fig box. We'll find out in the next year or two whether that magazine article is anywhere near the truth. I am going to have a bumper crop of winter squash mashed potato. A lot of these will be going to the farm shop because they sold really well last year. Well, unusually for me, I'm going to be a little bit controversial, and I've decided to read some names from this book, Potty, Fartwell and Knob. And the author spent ages going through the birth and marriage records, etc., going back hundreds of years to come up with the names that people were christened. I always thought, or I thought until recently, that these ridiculous names people are given, the ridiculous names people are given was a new phenomena of people trying to be different. It's not. In fact, by this book's standards, today's modern attempts at stupid names are quite amateurish. So I'm going to read some out, and I'm not going to swear, but they are a little bit rude and risque. So if you're of a sensitive disposition, go somewhere else. Anyway, this current offering is entitled Pleasant Titty and Her Bosom Chums. So these are all names in the records in the UK. Sarah Baps, Rebecca Beartit, Eliza Boobies, Edith D. Boobs, Tryphena Bosom, there's a mouthful, Jane Breast, Seymour Bust, that doesn't say whether that's a man or a woman, Jemima Busty, My Boob Bucks. Fancy having a first name, My Boob. Mary Buxom, Chesty Carroll, Ellen Bristol Dancer, Jugs Ferner, Hannah Globes, Emma Hooters, Fanny Knockers, Lucy Mammary, Melons Meakin, Mary Melons, Elizabeth Nipple, Elizabeth Norks, Elsie Stitz, George Bunny Teat, Bosom Thaxter, Tits Tillies, Phoebe Tit, Fanny Titball, Fanny Titball, she's got it all covered there, hasn't she? Willie Titcock, Funny Titman, Fanny Titsworth, Charles Dud Tit, Sarah Titty and Pleasant Titty. She was named after her mother in 1768, so there was a pair of Pleasant Titties in the family. Oh, it's just, it goes on and on. It's hilarious. Yeah, I apologise. It's cheap carry-on humour, but it's the kind of... Some people had a cross to bear their whole lives, didn't they? Anyway, if you're anything like me, you'll find all that very amusing and very silly. Well, another good day. Really mundane stuff. I haven't videoed it. Lots of hoeing, lots of getting the couch grass out the paths, hoeing and raking the beds. The cabbage bed, again, I've taken the net completely off, hoed around the cabbages. So yeah, all very boring, but it does make a difference. The plot is looking a lot cleaner for it. And two things for me to focus on in the next couple of weeks, maybe a month. The first is I need to start sowing for next year. So that's garlic, elephant garlic, onion sets, which I haven't bought yet. Oh, and broad beans and sweet peas. I'm going to sow and set all of those in the next 2 to 3 weeks, ready for next year, especially the broad beans. That's critical because the broad beans that I sow in the autumn grow and harvest before the black fly arrive, whereas if I sow the broad beans in the spring, the black fly, even with pinching out the tips, makes no difference, the black fly ruin them. So that's the first thing that I've got to concentrate on in the next couple of weeks. And the second one is saving my seeds. Specifically, I've saved my peas. I need to save the runner beans and the French beans. I have had a look at some of them today and they're perfect. They're ready for picking. So the next time I come up, I'm going to bring some paper bags, label them and save my seed for next year. Something I've not really done a great deal of in the last 6 years. I've just preferred to buy them. It's simple, it's easy, but there's no reason not to. They're sitting there, they've all gone brown. I might as well save them. So that's something for the next couple of weeks. Talking of which, I won't be here next week. We're away on Dartmoor for the week. Really looking forward to that. So I shan't post next weekend, but I will the weekend after. So I hope your garden or your allotment are going well. And all being well, I shall be back in a fortnight. So until then, look after yourselves. Take care. Bye for now.